Weird. It's supposed to allow everybody. We're just getting feedback. We need to turn that one down. I'm in Italy and there's an aid car coming.
Al, are you giving Jeff a hand?
What? Now this one we should be able to hear it through this. Oh, because there's no volume there. This one. Mute on this guy. Right here. There it is. Yeah. I have to turn it way down. Alright, that works. I don't know why it did that last time. It didn't do that last time. No. The speakers aren't too close to each other, I don't think. Or maybe that's the issue. It didn't do that when we tested it earlier today. All right. Full screen again. So you did practice today, huh? I did. Yeah, I did. How to make it a full screen? That's this phone number.
You are muted. You or unmute yourself.
That will probably fix it. That should fix it. Should be able to hear through this. Yeah. You guys want to? Yeah. I'll get my presentation ready when you're ready to do that. All right. Yep.
Before I start the meeting, I have a mirror flag. If anybody would like it, you're welcome to it. It's a 3x5 and it's in good condition. So if anybody wants to take it home, it's right here. Now I'll call the meeting to order. Community Services Advisory Board meeting, and I would like to introduce everybody because we have some new folks. Kyle, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Kyle Franklin. I live over in Oakbrook, and I have for just over a year.
I'm Mike Rainstetter, and I'm the monthly liaison, at least for this meeting. Added a Senate member of the council. Monday we'll be rediscussing in order to make room for him to have.
Shelby Taylor, the newbie.
And I'm Edith Wallace, and I live over in Lakewood. Momentarily, Chair. Any public comments? I don't see any. How about you, Jeff? Do you want to be introduced or not?
Sure. I'm Jeff Gunn. I'm the program manager for CDBG and Home. We know most of you, but it's good to meet the two new members. So I appreciate it. And I guess Mr. Rainstetter, council member, who was the appointee, do we know?
Yeah, it was stressing things so fast. Yeah, someone who's lived in Lakewood for most of his 50 years, he's here at Bowen. And, he's been appointed to fill the remainder of the Councilmember term. Be until December 1st. He'll actually start on Monday, he's sworn in on Monday. Like, we counted when we usually at January every year. Sorry, who's the liaison to this, and I have to do that this year. We have to deal with the fact that Barbara was not here. Fill the roles that she was filling. So, I fill this one. The idea that we're gonna do this again now that we have another member. Give him some things to do. I don't know how that's gonna go, but part of it, we have to learn a little bit about what his schedule is. Like, this morning. Things that are. But that's, you know, and we went into the meeting on the 8th. Applicants. There we go. Yeah. Process with every council member got to vote for. And so, and then after that round of voting, then it was reduced from 8 to 4. Just using those 4, well, got to vote for 3, and then that got reduced to, down to 2. And then voting again to choose the person, and then, as it turned out, that turned out to be a 3-3 tie. So we had to vote one more time. I would just think detailed data. Came across the interview to us, we put this question. He wrote out his answers to all the questions he gave it to us, and then sort of read the answer to us, which was the only one to do that. The rest of them also. But we ended up with the last 8 votes, including 4 men and 4 women. Some diversity, demographics, all the men were Caucasian. But in the first round of voting, somebody voted, everybody got a vote from somebody. So we didn't start out all together or like mine. And it's at least with the, I think it was pretty transparent how we were getting there. Pattern votes reduced for. Perhaps the process that took 3 months, a few weeks longer than like Valentine's Day. We were originally going to had this all scheduled for Valentine's Day was a Monday. And
Really, there's a little sentiment going on.
and
Little sentimental part.
the interviews or something to do that. And some of my colleagues not willing to commit themselves to doing something that wasn't already scheduled on Valentine's Day. So it got pushed off for another 2 weeks.
Kind of sounds human to me.
Yeah. Well,
Eddie,
Oh, I was just saying that, I was curious to see what it was, so. Thank you. Now you're meeting at now. All right.
okay, shall we go back to the agenda? We need to review the minutes from the November 22nd, 2022 meeting, and I think everybody got them in electronic form. Are there any additions or corrections? Any questions? Second. Okay. And let's see if we can- let's go on to our review. The situation we need to share. Let's share. Terms are for a year. Okay, suggestions.
Make a recommendation, and say it's at status quo.
Well, that was pretty clear.
well, this is kind of like a parole board.
Assuming everybody wants to.
Yeah,
look at
unless
it.
you have
Yeah, unless you have somebody. who
Shelby,
wants-
have you not figured out by now? This is kind of a question.
I love it. I'm
We're
here for
real
it.
working, been together a long time,
This is under-
committed to the city, however.
From Shannon, so I don't know.
Kyle,
There's
are
two
you ready
Franklin-
to read up?
There's
I make
Yeah.
a motion,
Me too.
I make a motion.
Oh, there's a motion on the floor. Oh, then now we'll have discussion.
Either stay as chair and Kyle as vice chair.
Okay. A second? I'll second. All those in favor of the
All right,
Anybody yes? No? I'm not voting.
Denise.
Okay, on to the next item. On to the next item is to the annual action for public housing. Jeff, you're on.
I have the public hearing first.
The annual action plan, public hearing.
So there's actually nobody really come to our public hearing, which is not surprising. We ever- super exciting thing. Like, we did an outreach. So I guess I'll before I jump into that. So the public hearings for the 2023 annual action plan. CDBG implements. We need to be kind of familiar with that. So I'll go through some slides.
so this is what we used to do in the chambers, right?
Yeah.
All kinds of people on that, okay.
Yeah, so what we've started to do is we've had good luck doing public hearings where we've sent targeted notices to all of the previous people that have ever applied. So pretty much all of the people that are involved in human services get invites. A lot of them show up. We'll usually do a pre-public hearing. We did one on last month. It was 9 actually showed up. So I try and kind of stretch things out and do more public hearings at this point in time. So we do one with them, we do one at this advice. And then we do one at council's April 30-day comment period. So there's actually 3 public. So what we're looking for, it's again, the city of Lakewood in fiscal year 2023, which is our 4th year of funding. The city is looking to receive $540,000 $42,464 in CDBG funds. $344,445. So with that, I can kind of bring up that PowerPoint slide, and some of this will make a little bit more sense. All right, so slow. So CDBG at home, for most of you, this is a little bit of a refresher. Some of you is kind of new. So the city is what's called an entitlement city. So we get monies directly through housing urban development for individuals to do things like housing, public service activities, infrastructure activities, and those types of things. So CDBG is one of the programs. That's the one the city's getting $464,000. Sorry, $542,000 in fiscal year 2023. Things that we can do with CDBG are a lot more expansive than they are with home. So CDBG, we can do housing, we can do simple living environments and expanding economic. So we can do business assistance, infrastructure, just about anything. Any service activities can be CDBG related as long as they're serving all moderate income persons. The home program is specifically to develop affordable housing. So it's just housing, rental housing, rehab, those types of things. So again, there's just quick eligible CDBG activities. Again, anything from affordable housing, anything that's associated with affordable housing development or public facilities is just infrastructure. So in years past, we've done a lot of sidewalks and curbs and street lighting and all kinds of things in low-income neighborhoods. Public services, healthcare things, services for seniors, fair housing, anything that you can potentially think of for services would qualify as long as it's medical people. And economic development is job creation related, so any business activity that persists in your daily jobs people. Home program, it's again, it's supporting housing activities, so construction costs, new construction, rehab, development, tenant-based rental assistance, demolition, relocation, anything that goes along with the development of the project. In Lakewood qualifies as low and moderate income is the far right column. So that defines low moderate income people as 8% of their households. So Lakewood's about 51, 52% low mod. And for a household, if you look at the far right, 80%, household of 4 is 81,200 qualifying as a household. Planning process. So this kind of goes through the planning process that we do for the annual action plan. There's 2 stages. There's a 5-year process, and then there's an annual action plan. So the 5-year process is just that. It's right now we're in the middle of our process. So it involves public input. We assess community strengths and needs, and we develop an overarching goal for the next 5 years. So that was done, like I said, in 2019, we did that with the council, and it was approved. In a couple of slides, you'll see the what we're doing, what council has prioritized over this 5-year cycle. So every year inside of that 5-year plan, then we develop what's called our 1-year annual action plan, and the same sort of process kind of takes place. There's a public input process, target specific goals on the annual basis to get to our 5-year goals. then we'll figure out what funding mechanisms operate inside to get things done. And it really is just one big giant circular process. So we start every year, whether it's a 5-year or the annual action plan, there's a citizen input process. We develop priorities out of that. If it's a 5-year process, that's kind of when the big 5-year priorities are developed, and every year it's just within that 5-year goals to kind of make sure that we're on track and meeting them all. There's typically an application December through February. Again, once we get the applications and take it to council, there's a citizen input process. Again, there's a 30-day comment period. After that, it's the approval of it. It goes to HUD in May, and then we start our process over every year. It's July 1st to June 30th. So halfway through this process. So here are wish I could move this.
I think when it becomes across, you can press it.
Oh, there it was. So here's the 5-year plans that we've set forward for fiscal year 2020 to 2024. There's 4 goals. So the goal 1 that was established was housing instability among residents, including homelessness. In the 5-year plan, we set targets of homeowner rehabilitation of 80 units, tenant-based rental assistance, 50 households, job creation, retention, 2 businesses assisted, and 5 jobs created. That's a small goal, but buildings demolished, 12 dangerous buildings. That's through our NSP program. So outcomes to date, you can kind of see where we are. This is, I've tallied all of the outcomes to this point. So currently we've rehabilitated 22 households and or are in the process of 6 going on right now, fully finished. There's 48 households that the city of Lakewood assisted with home tenant-based rental assistance. So this last 2 years was kind of different than most years. COVID funds came in from everywhere. So we got additional home funds, we received additional ARPA funds, we received additional CDBG, CB funds. So all of those funds went to council, and they were primarily targeted to tenant-based rental assistance, mortgage assistance, some business assistance, those types of programs. So we assisted 48 households with a home TBRI program. We assisted 175 households with the CDBG CB tenant-based rental assistance. So those 2 programs alone serve just over 500 individuals. And then there was 11 households that received mortgage assistance. 39 persons assisted with that. And we did assist 15 businesses and maintain 38 jobs in the city of Lakewood through the programs.
So you demolish this, do a basic of that. How many have we had?
Let's see if I can put that up there. With dangerous buildings with NSP, we've demolished 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 12. So, and that's not all the dangerous buildings in the city abates. Right. We have 2 different funds. So on average, we abates 17 to 25.
I forgot, we did that.
Yeah, what happens when we do a dangerous building is there's a lien file, so the city spends X amount of dollars, we file a lien on the property. 3 years later, it goes to foreclosure, and then typically Habitat will come in and buy them. It's the one exemption that's allowed when the Pierce County forecloses them is for housing. So Pierce County, Food Humanity, or organizations will come in and buy it and get paid back. So kind of a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, I think that we don't get title to the land 100%, but we always get our money back. We cut because if we don't get title, we get a lien.
Yes.
And then when the property changes hands, we do that. And when we have a lien, I guess we lien with interest.
Yeah, 90% for residential now, 12 for commercial. Yeah.
But sometimes the property owner walks away and we just get title to it. We transfer to someone
goal 2 in the 5-year plan was,
Jeff, I need to ask a question. When you talk about businesses,
Uh-huh.
what kind of businesses?
city Lakewood businesses, so small businesses typically.
Okay.
So we have a program where we assist any business in the city of Lakewood as long as they retain 1 employee for $35,000 in assistance. We actually capped it at $10,000 per employee. So we provided a number of businesses. There was a fee businesses that we assisted. Curbside. Not this time.
No, I got this.
In years past, we did that for a section of people. There was a couple of restaurants that we assisted. There was a daycare that we assisted. There was a couple of 253 TVs. There was a bunch of really small businesses. They were all typically less than 10 employees. I think that was one of the provisions that council set for small business. So it was fun. I've done that for a long time. So.
I think we need to take a break. We have a new joining member, and I'd like to go around the table and introduce each other to her and tell you know where we are on the agenda. I'm Edith Thornwalls, and I'm the chair.
I'm Jeff, I'm program manager.
I'm Kyle Franklin, I'm vice chair.
I'm like Blackie, just a regular old member.
I'm Mike Branstetter, and I'm the council.
Yes, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Martha Larkin, and I'm step member also. I'm Toby Stewart, also a new member.
She's gonna be
She's gonna be late.
I thought somebody misspelled Kyle's name.
So what we're doing is kind of going through the CDBG and whole consolidated plan process. Just going through, right now, we're going through the 5-year process. So there's the city gets CDBG and home funds every year through housing urban development. So one of the funds is CDBG, and the city's getting about $542,000 in home. They're getting $100,000. So this kind of goes through the process of how it gets allocated, what becomes of it. So this is goal 2. Would be limited supply of diverse and rental ownership opportunities. So the city decided that 24 homeowner rental housing units would be added. So far to date, this is kind of it looks like it's a slow project, but what happens with new developments is it's spend a lot of time. So to date, we've done, LASA has purchased a single family rental house, 8966 Bradley Lake. It was the last of their 4 pieces of property. At the end, I'll show you LASA's new development with them. So we also provided 1 household with down payment assistance. And the big projects that are ongoing are Habitat's developing 12 new affordable single family homes in Boat Street in Tilcomb neighborhood. Those are supposedly going to be done, and they haven't started them yet, but June of 2024 is the timeline to get those done. So that project's really going to go from 0 to 60 miles an hour in a real quick bit here.
And Lakewood, LASA is Lakewood Area Shelter Association, and Habitat is Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah. So LASA is developing 25 affordable housing units on Gravelly Lake Drive. So the last it still doesn't.
I don't know what to do. You were hacked.
Anyway, so LASA is developing 25 units of affordable housing at Gravelly Lake Drive. Those are realistically going to start in about 2025. So the funding is just getting put together on those. Goal 3. Need for affordable, culturally competent services is goal 3. So what we were looking to do for goal 3 is fair housing and landlord tenant stabilization services. 250 individuals will be served, and emergency assistances for displaced residents. 50 individuals will be served. So to date, we've served, not a lot, but 7 individuals have been provided housing counseling. That's through Habitat. 18 of individuals, there are a couple of new programs here. So 18 individuals have been served with emergency assistance for displaced residents, 9 households. Actually, that went up by 2 households this last week. So it's 20 households, or sorry, 9, it'll be 11 households and 25 individuals. So the new program is a 25 individuals assisted with CDBG emergency payments program, so 10 households. This is a new program that we started last year, brought forth to council. One of the comments that we got, or a lot of the comments we got from one of our public hearings was there's no programs out there paying for like utilities that are due for low-income households that they were unable to pay. Some of the deposits and stuff to move from one place to another. There was no programs paying for those types of things. Moving fees. This is not working.
Well, Russell does utility payments.
They do.
Yeah.
And
Just
then,
in the individual assessment for emergency payments aren't really including garbage. Garbage.
yeah, so any sort of a utility that's unpaid that somebody's is going through.
Just want to make sure about the
Basic. Yeah, any living expense that they have that would potentially be something that, like Pierce County Sewer files liens when people are unpaid. So we were paying some of those things for low-income households.
Okay.
There's some food and clothing potential assistance in there. Say somebody's looking for a job, they need new clothing to go out and interview. Actually, somebody wanted to apply for that.
Yeah, I don't know that we even need any sound coming from the speaker. If you could mute the speaker and you can still show the slides, we can find.
It's totally muted, but this one won't mute either. It should stay muted. One more time. Let's see, it won't stay. All 3. So the emergency assistance payments program.
This is another one of those areas where this plan is a plan on how to spend the CDBG money and the home money. That with there being a whole lot of other sources of money in the past things, some of those numbers are really much greater, but the other money would use to be able to go and do that. But we're getting to the end of the stream of COVID related and money, so that it's going to become where CDBG is going to become more so the prominent vehicle by which we fund to be able to provide these in the community. So it's certainly is a challenge to Jeff and Martha to decide what person gets to count against a CDBG outcome and what person was an ARP outcome and what person was some other outcome. But holistically, when you look at the overall thing, we've really done and helped more folks than Jeff can show on these slides, because this is a slide about CDBG money impact.
And the one interesting thing about the emergency payments program, we just had a lady stopped in an hour ago. So she's a homeless individual living in her car and wasn't able to make the car payment last month, and they repossessed her car with everything that she owns in the car. So we're able to pay for her repossession costs and make her last payment so she can get her car back. And she had an interview to go to today, but she couldn't get to the interview because they repossessed her car. So she's kind of in a bad situation. So things like that we can help people with.
When she was living in her car with her two middle school age kids, one going to Four Heroes and one going to Lockburn. And they were sleeping in different parking lots in the car. And when the car got repossessed yesterday, they wound up sleeping on the sidewalk over by Barnes and Noble last night. And so there was a big scramble between the McKinney-Vento people at the school district and us and a few other agencies today, trying to get them into something stable so that the kids could stay in school. So, yeah, these are things that we're running into now that we didn't used to get involved in before.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we have going is we're starting our Fair Housing Center of Washington is providing landlord tenant counseling and fair housing training. So we're doing one tomorrow in the Springbrook neighborhood. I think we're doing one in Tillicum in April. And
At
then
their neighborhood association.
we'll do another follow-up with another landlord one after that. So those goals are kind of on the way to getting met. The only goal that we won't meet is goal number 4, the need for safe, accessible homes and facilities, which leads to infrastructure improvements for the city. For the most part, we estimated 25,775 people would be served. So the project that we are just wrapping up would be sidewalk improvements on Phillips Road. So we did Phillips Road from Agate to Onyx Drive, the west side of the road. So we connected up the last bit of sidewalks to the school there that were non-existent. So that served 5,345 individuals. And I don't believe we have another infrastructure project. Well, we could, I guess there's another year in the plan, but we don't have one this year.
Well,
So,
yeah, I mean, there has been some discussion about an infrastructure project that is for 2025, which would be the 2024 year here in the Vista neighborhood, where they're looking at some enhancements in and leading to Wards Lake Park, where there's a significant project designed to expand and upgrade the park and access to the park that the city thought was funded. But inflation has now made the budget estimates of that short some money, and so there may be an opportunity to use some CDBG money, not in this year's budget that we're looking for, but in a one when that is really going to go to construction and have some costs, because that is a neighborhood that is CDBG eligible. And there was another project that was going to be done, which was a set of streetlights in one of the additions of Oak Brook. And it was designed that it was the one section of Oak Brook class that is definable as a low-income neighborhood. And a whole bunch of people there said they didn't want streetlights. It would detract from the.
They rallied up and they.
No, I mean, it was really good. They came in and they were doing it, and they said, we don't want poles along our streets. We want to maintain the rural character of it, and being able to go and do that. And the city council said, we voted and said, tough, you're getting streetlights. And then the mayor decided that, well, let's vote again in 2 weeks later, okay, and say, okay, you don't have to have streetlights if you don't want them, but we're putting streetlights everywhere in the city.
Right.
Okay, and so we're not going to put the streetlights in, but recognize that you're at the end of the line if you ever come back to us and say you want them. And we're 3 years away from finishing the rest of the city on streetlights. To be able to go and do that. But it was, and in that, the conversation in the same way, and they said, and we don't want sidewalks Okay, and, we want to maintain a rural island in that is what it was like when many of those families purchased those homes. It was one of the very first sections of Oak Brook to be developed, and so it's been there. But the age of homeowners is higher than much of Oak Brook. But okay.
That's the reason.
Yeah. So there are a lot of folks there, and there are a lot of folks in that particular section of Oak Brook that are old enough to be on fixed incomes, which is one of the things. And then plus then there are a number of apartments in that particular census tract, and so that's one of the things that drives the average income there down to where it becomes a CDBG eligible neighborhood. It's really one of the few neighborhoods on the west side of the city that is, a low income, and they don't see themselves that way.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, be able to go and do that, but it's just one of those things that's interesting that something that is viewed as helpful, it's looked at, and most of the city would be glad to have. Occasionally, you get folks that see it a little bit differently in their immediate neighborhood, and that's all right. We're a city of neighborhoods. We're not. Not East Berlin, where every block needs to look exactly the same.
Be curious how long those folks have lived there and what their history is with the city.
Well, for most of them, okay, and again, there's always some turnover in housing, but most of them, their history with the city is, we were here before there was a city. We didn't necessarily want there to be a city.
Oh, that's what I was curious about.
So the CDBG funds, I put together some colorful slides for you. I'm trying to do something so that you can see kind of, it's hard to understand like where we're going unless you kind of see what's happened over the years and what we've done. So the next couple slides will kind of show that. So CDBG, you can see we've been an entitlement city since 2000. The peak was 2001. We received almost 1.5 million back then. And it's progressively gone downhill every year. So now we receive about, say, 900,000, 800,000 to 900,000 a year on average with both of them combined. So it's not a great trajectory. And I was looking through there and thinking, well, maybe there's a Republican or Democratic correlation on the funding, and I'm like, no, just downhill.
Well, one of the things though is that in 1996, when the city incorporated, because part of the formula in terms of how much money we get, it has to do with population. Well, we went from 1996 to 2008 or 2009 and didn't gain any people. So as the numbers, as the calculations went, whereas some cities were envisioned of having increased populations, and they goes up, and we're getting a percentage of all the entitlement city dollars. So in the past 4 years, we started to see some population increases, and so we're more competitive than we are, along with the fact that the Congress always allocates a specific amount of money, and then it's got to get divided up. So if you're not growing, then your share is shrinking.
Yeah. Formulaically, yeah. So this is an interesting slide. I tracking this for a while, and I don't think I've ever really shown that many people this slide. It goes in council presentations every year so they can kind of see where we're at, but it goes through the different categories of spending. So 2000 to present, the categories are at the top. So there's physical infrastructure would be the first column on the left. then housing, public services, economic development administration, a section 108 loan. It's a repayment is what it was. And then there's CDBG, CV 1, 2, and 3, which were kind of the whole CARES Act and ARPA things going on with COVID. So you can kind of see it's fairly consistent through the years. I mean, it's the two primary focuses have been physical infrastructure, so roads, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, street lighting. Over the years, we've gotten away from that in more recent years and focused a lot on affordable housing. And that's, I mean, you guys are, you hear it out there. I mean, affordable housing, it's the biggest need out there at this point in time for most individuals. So we focused on that. This 5-year plan focuses on affordable housing. Public services, we used to do a decent amount of public services. Human services has kind of taken that torch over the last 6 or 7 years. There's a little bit that I'm proposing to do in this next couple of years for public services. Economic development has almost been non-existent with CDBG. It's a more difficult category kind of to meet. Administration is just the city's administration of the programs. So that's a kind of a good category of what we've done. And then the bottom it talks about program income. So every year we get paid back for loans and things that we do. So we generate program income, and not a lot of program income, but over $1 million of program income over the years have come in. So, and it's Martha and I have, when we started doing loans, we're going to start generating more program income now. But when we started doing loans 20 years ago, Martha and I kept telling everybody, don't worry, we won't be here 20 years from now when these loans come due. And
It's happening.
we're here.
We're still here.
So a lot of the loans that we've made over the 20 years are starting to come due. So now Martha and I are getting to call back some of the homeowners that we were able to do the work for, and they're kind of shocked. You guys are still there. We're still here. So it's kind of a fun program to get reintroduced into people and meet them again.
Didn't we several years ago give money to the car lot?
Yeah, that was through section.
Curbside.
It was a loan. We loaned money
Yeah,
to. the
Right,
car
I used,
lot.
thanks for correcting my language. But, I mean, they got money from us.
they got $710,000 from us to develop curbside motors at, what is it, 9915 South Tacoma Way. And
Right,
that was an interesting deal. That I like section 108. It's a lot of work to do for a really
Right.
small amount of funds, but bringing him here, I think he's in the top 50. Actually, he was, I assume he still is, top 50 in the nation of used car dealers and volume sales. That guy
Yeah.
moves so many
Yes,
cars.
you look at the license plates you see around town, more curbside
Yeah.
motors, a lot of them.
And we brought
Yeah.
him from the edge of Tacoma into Lakewood. So it was kind of nice to bring that revenue.
And there is that is a type of business that generates significant sales tax.
Yeah.
yes.
Oh.
Yes,
So-
I just remember that we were really nervous. We're doing a what?
Yeah, that was the first section 108 loan that you all
Yeah.
had seen. It was
It was
kind of
like,
bringing it
What is
together.
this?
Yeah, it was a fun program, and I'm happy he's here. I don't know that that's it.
Well, I have a question.
Yes, Larry.
So nowhere on that did I see any of the road work, sidewalks and
It was all the infrastructure projects.
endless roundabouts that have plagued Washington and veterans and it continues like 2 years in. And I would set aside some of my annoyance on a daily basis going to the VA. But if we're not paying for them, I'm just going to be fully annoyed then. But I mean, CDBG didn't get to invest in any of that?
Well, I will tell you that first of all, for instance, if you look at veterans, veterans was half paid for with an allocation from the state legislature.
Okay, good.
That if you remember, Representative Kildoff on the 28th, she got, a million point something for us to do part of that work on veterans. And then there were a series of 7 projects that the city sold bonds for to get the money to do. And that is really most significant funding for Washington Boulevard and Gravelly Lake Drive,
Mhm.
and as well as some upcoming work that they're going to do on Hipkins Road and some other things. So it wasn't, and for the most part of that had to do with they weren't necessarily in CDBG eligible neighborhoods. You know, where for instance, you saw that they did the sidewalks on Phillips.
Right.
That's because that was sidewalk that was down next to that neighborhood in Oak Brook that is actually a low income neighborhood.
It only could have been on that side.
Yeah, and you couldn't have put the sidewalk on the other side of the street
Right.
because the census tract ran down the middle of the road and you couldn't put the sidewalk on the other side of the street, which is why we had to take down some oak trees. So there's a lot of money that goes into transportation and infrastructure projects that there's been a lot of sewer projects in Pilico. Okay, and those have all been funded in other ways other than using CDBG and home dollars. You know, the neighborhood is eligible, but you know, there's money that was specifically available in terms of either grants or loans for sewers that the city was able to take advantage of. So it's it's a challenge to how to put all of those things together.
Right.
And in some cases, it would have been easy to just go to Jeff and say, give us some money and let us do that. But with a little bit more work, you can get other people's money. And to the extent that we can get other people's money, that's good. I think historically on there, maybe the most significant thing is if you remember 108th Street. 108th,
Yes.
108th Street when it was in really bad shape when we became a city and it was getting worse and then they redid it from Bridgeport over to the Main Street in the City Hall. That was funded through these programs.
Oh.
We did a section 108 loan for 108th Street.
Yeah, so I think,
Kind of ironic.
but again, it ran through a neighborhood that was eligible.
Right, that area is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Still, I think it's.
I have another question.
Okay.
So when we allocate grant funding to the nonprofits that come and ask us for funds, we have a lot of questions on the application about inclusion, diversity, who benefits, cultural things. Is with the individuals and the businesses that are benefiting from these different things, do you track demographic information like that?
Yeah. Yeah, all jobs and all households and everybody served. It's by female head of household, ethnicity, race, age, being if they're seniors or not, those types of things. Yeah, all of that gets tracked. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head because it's been a couple of years since we served those individuals, but it seems most of our housing programs, I'm assuming that if I'm making a misstatement, you can correct me, Martha, but most of our housing programs are elderly, single female head of household programs. By and large, probably 85 to 90% of our households are that in rehabs.
And we do track on everything, but it's not, it doesn't weigh into whether or not they get funded, but we do track and report.
Yeah. And there's a large percentage of minority populations that qualify for our housing rehab programs. Again, that's probably at least 50% of our rehabs are a minority and people of color. So it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So, and even that emergency program, the new ones that we're doing, emergency assistance for displaced residents and emergency payments programs are kind of in the same realm. Seems like it's about 50%. By population and those types of things. So, and the bad thing is those are great programs, but the bad thing is what happens. I mean, you're helping somebody who's been displaced. So, I mean, it's affecting minority populations, but it's good that we're there to step in and say, hey, got these programs to help you out and kind of keep you from becoming homelessness or from becoming homeless.
I have a quick question in regards to the emergency. How did the mother, how did she find out about the program? Did she call 211? Was it McKinney veto?
She called 211 more than once, but actually it was the school district that stepped in because the kids had said that they had slept on the sidewalk.
Okay.
And they called CPS and made a couple of other moves before they sat down with her and really. And apparently the McKinney Vento team had worked with her before. So that's how she got in. And the school district contacted me to see if I had any ideas or resources. And Jeff and I talked about this emergency payment program and said, this is something that would fit. So we had her come down and we're working with her now.
Okay.
So
If people
Yeah.
get in that situation, there are actually a lot of doors available to them. But first of all, they have to find them and then they have to find the key to them.
right, that's
Right,
right.
right.
She's
I have some neighbors that are teachers and I kind of keep checking with them, what's going on at school? What's happening? And there's been an increase in the sensitivity of this faculty in the kids exactly as we're talking. And to say, yeah, I've got this kid. That's, I know, and I'm watching it and, I've got them under my thumb to kind of see how this is going to play out. But it's the same kind of thing, finding the right place and getting to the right severity so that you fit in. That's for these folks, it's very frustrating for them.
Well, to be comfortable enough to ask for the help, because if CPS gets involved, then it's like, I don't even want to ask for help. I'll figure it out. I find that with a lot of the folks that I serve in my program. So that's why I was asking, like, how do I refer them to programs like that so they don't even get in that sleeping outside stage?
And I'll ask a question. Your program is?
Palmer Scholars, we're a pre-apprenticeship program where we're promoting young adults 18 to 26 to get into the construction trades. Oftentimes our highest population are homeless parents. So
Right, that's for sure,
mhm.
for sure. Okay, thank you for that explanation.
And then the other thing that I wanted to kind of show you guys is what's going on with one of our home projects. So this is the LASA, Lakewood Area Shelters Association. It's Living Access Support Alliance now. They kind of changed their name every 15 years.
Well, they're going by straight loss.
LASA now. So, they've changed their name. Wait till next year, we'll try to get that next name. They're a really cool organization though. But so this is literally kind of due north of here. So Gravelly Lake Drive is right here. City of Lakewood would be quite a ways down here. But it's kind of a cool development. This is the parcel that we bought about a year and a half. We funded for LASA to buy about a year ago. So they own obviously all of these parcels. This parcel they purchased 8 to 10 years ago. We were able to get them funding through Pierce County. There's another house right here that will go in the future. We were able to get them funding for that. So they were able to buy all those parcels. They combined, or they're going to combine that. Ultimately, it'll all be one parcel. In 2015, they built the existing LASA Prairie Oaks. It's a 15 unit in client services center building. So we're doing some hygiene center improvements on that now. We're working with them to go out to bid. So they're going to have showers and laundry and all kinds of access to the facility. So that'll be kind of cool. But phase 3 is one that we're looking to fund now, is 25 units of affordable housing. So it'll be on the backside, individual units. The county's allocated $3.5 million to that project already. The city allocated $1 million in ARPA funds. Sometime in April, when I can free myself up, we're going back into some more funds through council. So we have another $1 million in LASA, $1 million in home, and just over $1 million in home ARP dollars, which or more CARES Act funding. So looking to fund that. That's about $6.5 million. It's about a $10.5 to $11 million project. So they're getting closer. There's a cities helping them with a state ask and a federal ask to get this project built. So it's kind of a cool project. The one nice thing, the existing LASA building is 15 units of permanent supportive housing. And this one, with the different funding sources, will give them an opportunity to do something different. Everybody's doing permanent supportive housing now. Nobody's really looking for transitional housing or some of these other things. So the funding stream that we're getting them at this point in time is going to free them up to not necessarily have to do all supportive housing, because everybody's doing So it's kind of nice to allow somebody to kind of do some different things rather than what everybody else is doing, because permanent supportive housing is great. It's not the end all be all. It doesn't serve everybody. You're kind of leaving out some population. Yeah, so giving them flexibility to kind of serve different populations, I think will be a good thing. So it'll also help the bottom line too. Permanent supportive housing is really expensive.
I heard on the radio that there's $1 million from the COVID state money that was going to LASA.
There is council approved.
No,
that.
it's. There's $1 million
state of
of,
Washington.
of money that came
Yes.
to the city.
City
The
got.
city is, you know, we got 13 million. And so we're, the last thing we did was we said, well, we're down to like 4 million left, where we
Mhm.
spent the rest of it. We said, well, it'll take $1 million to go to
Right.
LASA. For two reasons: one, because it's a good project, and two, that the city, as Jeff said, we're helping them ask for some federal money, make up the last part, and for some state money. And for the city to go to the state and the federal government and say, we'd like you to give money to it, it's good for us to say, because we've already given $1 million. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah,
thinking
well,
when I heard that. I said, now that's really smart.
Yeah, you don't want to ask somebody unless you've got some skin in the game to start with.
Yeah.
In other words, that we go on and do that. And it goes on. And like I said, this is a thing to finish on the chart, that phase 3, you know, and then 5 years from now, we'll be working to fund the phase 4
Yep.
piece of that to be able to go and do that.
Be another 25
So
years.
it's, and LASA is really the only major developer of permanent supportive housing and things like that. You know, you hear all the time about really much bigger projects going on, but they go on in Tacoma and places over there. And quite frankly, a lot of it has to do with places like Tacoma and Seattle and Bellevue can put a whole lot more public money in the hands of an organizations, and organizations that are actually really much bigger than LASA and that are regional. But LASA is the primary organization in Lakewood that it was developed in Lakewood, is the focus to do that. You know, they were originally the Lakewood Area Shelter Association. You know, about 10 years ago, they changed their name because they were getting as many calls for homeless pets as they were for homeless people. And so that's why they changed their name.
So I guess the last piece of the puzzle that I wanted to go through is just kind of showing you where I'm looking to kind of focus to get us to kind of, we're in year 4 of the 5-year plan, so we can get to a good place in year 5 so we can meet all of our goals. So they're really, for the last 3 years, it's kind of been the same things that we're doing. And I see that happening in this next year and potentially in the following year, being consistent and kind of following through to develop affordable housing. So the one pager that I presented to you is just kind of the allocations that we're getting and how we're looking to continue to meet those 5-year goals. So most of the funding is going to housing, or at least was proposed to go to housing. Administration is always a 20% cap. That's pretty consistent. We spend that. There's myself, Martha, and another person that helps us out doing it. So we pretty consistently spend all of our admin dollars on that. So housing, there's the programs that we've done for years, major home repair and sewer loan programs. It's a homeowner rehab program. So owners that are living in their house, 80% or low mod, we go in and do all kinds of repairs for them. There's a CDBG administration of home housing services allocation proposed. What that is all of our home dollars we get through in a consortium through Tacoma and the city of Lakewood. So Tacoma takes all of our administration dollars for that program. So we still do affordable housing development and rehabs for that program, but we don't have any administration dollars. So we usually allocate a small amount of our CDBG to allow myself time to do environmental reviews and bidding processes and all the things that we have to do. So there's usually some additional admin that's covered at CDBG. There's something called EADR, which is Emergency Assistance for Displaced Residents. We've been doing that program now for 7 or 8 years. It's a fairly well subscribed program. Again, it's not the greatest thing when we're doing it, but it's the greatest thing for the people that we're helping out so they don't become homeless. It'd be one of those programs I wish I never had to fund, but housing it's being redeveloped and people are being displaced, so we're able to assist them. And sometimes it's the city of Lakewood where we'll go in and find buildings that are unsafe and we get people out of there and help them into the new house. So it's kind of a nice deal where we can pay for their first and last and down and those types of things. And then Rebuilding Together South Sound. They contacted us, myself and Dave, probably 6 months ago and wanted to do some rehab programs. And Martha gets what, 2 or 3 calls a week
At least.
on programs that we can't, or projects that we can't fund. Our rehab program is for owner occupied single family stick frame structures. So we get lots of calls from people that are in mobile homes or some other structures that don't quite meet, or they've done reverse mortgages, or there's all kinds of things that won't qualify you for our program. So there would be a $75,000 allocation for Rebuilding Together South Sound to do 15 households. So they would smaller projects. So they're going to go in and do like ramps and decks and minor repairs, water heaters, just little things on households for people that we wouldn't do with our rehab program. Public services would be the proposed CDBG emergency payments program, $80,000. And that again would just continue the emergency payments program that we have, kind of all of it's kind of the catch-all program that funds stuff that nobody else is funding out there. And Michael, the council hasn't seen this yet, so you get the preview. And none of this is set in stone. I mean, all of this is just kind of staff puts this together, taking council's 5-year goals. And then depending on who comes to us and asks for money, we see what we can make work. If council has projects that they want to see, like infrastructure or whatever, we kind of make the budget. We take our magic wand and sprinkle the fairy dust and throw the money where it goes. But for the most part, we just try and consistently meet those 5-year goals. And then home affordable housing is, we're putting all of our money to affordable housing fund. Oh, I think that's what it is. If you have any questions, I guess maybe Martin can help.
Well, one of the things is that when council looks at this, and and Jeff tells us exactly what it's looking for, that we're in an environment where we're going to look at what the state legislature is doing right now, because particularly around housing and things, the state legislature is creating pots of money that the city can apply for that might do some of these things. And the same is true at the county. Well, and where there is the county is looking to consider imposing some new taxes, particularly to address housing needs and things, which may in fact be something that could fund a housing counseling program or something to do that. But by and large, this is a great many things that need to be done, and that lacking funding from elsewhere, this is a way that it could. Now, if funding from elsewhere is found for some of these, then you're in a position to move some money around or make some of the other amounts different, or find something completely new. On the council's wish list, we're really looking to try to figure out, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we funded, assisted an agency with funding with the acquisition of a motel.
That's right, yeah.
And we provided some funding, and the condition of that is that while you're operating as a shelter, you will make sure that there are at least 12, and it wasn't beds, but 12 rooms, which could be more than 12 people that will be set aside for folks that came from Lakewood. You know, that came off the street in Lakewood or being able to go into. But that is being converted into permanent supportive housing at the end of 2023. And so we'll no longer have access to those 12 beds that primarily our police department fills with people that they encounter on the street, and we can get them all to be able to go and do that. So we're at the council level, we're concerned about what's the next project that'll continue to provide someplace to put folks that are doing that, and it was primarily looking not so much for families, because it wasn't necessarily a family thing, but it's a thing for an individual who is on the street, maybe has chronically been on the street, being able to go and do that. You know, there's a real challenge with the chronically homeless who are all. There's a combination of people recognize that every one of those people has got some kind of a unique problem that has manifested itself into long-term homelessness. And then at the same time, everybody stereotypes all the people like that into, you know, they're all people with behavioral health and drug addictions problems, as if there is a single solution that you just apply to all and it will go away. And so those are just the extremes of the spectrum, and got to look at it. But we are looking to do that, and I guess that I would say in our discussions about how to do that, and while we didn't talk real specifically about using CDBG dollars, in part because homelessness. Part of the problem with CDBG dollars is there's a geographical limitation on where you could spend, you know, so you could, a homeless person who's put up a tent in Oak Brook Park isn't eligible to have CDBG dollars spent on them. Whereas if they put it in Springbrook Park, they are, because of the way the neighborhood is. But that's not true. You know, you as a group are one of the primary folks that help us take a look at the 1% for human services that we look out there, and that we rely upon this committee to sort of look for the best ways to do that with whatever guidance we give or fail to give to you. To go on to do that. But you know, but when we get around talking about that pot of money, we may well talk about, have we got some providers out there that maybe can do some sheltering, and being able to go and do that, and with at some sort of reasonable cost that makes sense to spend public dollars on, to go on off. And I tell you that when I say that sometimes we give you guidance and sometimes we don't give you any, Edith can tell you I was the liaison in a long 10 years ago to this council when the council decided to take a big chunk of money and say, well, we've got our own ideas to be able to go and do that. And it
was kind of bumpy.
yeah, and it didn't necessarily become something that was impactful, but it actually centered around an organization that didn't like the application progress and process and didn't want to fill out an application, and they just called some city council members and said, you know, we need $6 figures for what we want to do, and unfortunately they got it for a year before the council then found another way to help them other than using the human services money. So the extent that sometimes the guidance is not great or significant is an expression of the confidence and trust that the council really has on your decision-making ability and recommendations.
Yes, I don't want to show you guys any more stuff. I don't be here forever, but some of the things that I thought were interesting in the annual action plan that I put together. And I thought they were interesting because I put it together. So I got to put in here what I thought was kind of important.
Did you get a chance to edit it?
No.
Oh.
I emailed it along for everybody, so. But some of the things that kind of jumped out at me was when you look at affordable housing and income and rents and those types of things. So there's two things. There's what's called cost burden households, and there's extremely cost burden households. So a cost burden household is somebody who's a household who spends 30% of their income on rent, and an extremely cost burden household is a household that spends 50% or more on rent. And some of the things that kind of jumped out at me was when you look at cost burden households, there was 52% of Lakewood's rental households cost burdened. So they're spending 30% of their 30% or more of their income on rent and household expenses. And only, what was it, 8.9%, 7.9% of owner occupied households are cost burdened. So there's a huge discrepancy between renters and homeowners that are cost burdened. Overall, Lakewood's population is 40, what was the number? About 42%, or 40.2%. Lakewood's households are considered cost burden. So it's a fairly high percentage just throughout the population. And then if you get to extremely cost burden households, it kind of has the same numbers. So extremely cost burden households, it was about 24% of renter households are paying 50% or more of their income for household expenses. And I don't know how you do that. That's a crazy number. And 7.9% of owner households are extremely cost burden, paying 50% or more. And 16.6% of Lakewood's population as a whole is extremely cost burdened. Some of the other things that were kind of interesting is Lakewood's area median income is $60,534. It's behind that of the county, which is $85,866. Washington's $84,247, and the United States national average is $69,021. And we have unfortunately, our population living below the poverty rate is 13.6%. It's come down every year, but it's still higher than what the county is. At 8%, Washington state's at 9.9, and the United States is at 11. Sorry. So we're still higher in that category. And then when you look at, as you mentioned, with people of color and minorities are disproportionately affected, for Lakewood, Black or African American households experience poverty at a rate of 17.4%. Hispanic households are 15%, and American Indian and Alaskan Native households 43.6%.
Ouch.
Whoa.
So a lot of those minority populations are extremely impacted by the issues that we have going on with poverty and living below the median income and cost burden, and those kind of hit them a lot harder than they do some other populations. Another one that was interesting, which I've kind of watched this over the years too, was where is it? Here we go. So households that are experiencing poverty who have children under the age, these are census statistics, and sometimes I don't know why they do some of the demographics they do with the ages. So children that are under the age of 18, 15.2% of all Lakewood households with children under years of 18 are living in poverty. And 30.8% of single female households with related children under 18 are living in poverty. So, I mean, you've got a fairly large percentage of households that are single mothers that are that way. There's when you go to the number, it says it increases to 47% of single female households with multiple related children under 5 years old and between 5 and 17. That's the weirdest category in my book. So 47% single mother households with 5-year-old children and between 5 and 17 are living in poverty. Probably not the greatest statistics to have. Some of the things that I looked at some Treasury studies, and a Treasury study found that in the second quarter of 2022, homeownership rates for white households were at 75%. When you compare those, there was 45% for Black homeownership rates, 48% for Hispanic, and 57% for non-Hispanic households of any other race. So we still have this housing disparity where white
Disparity.
households tend to own their own houses. Off the top of my head, the household wealth gap was about 4 times greater for Black and minority populations versus white households. So there's still this issue where, I mean, most of us gain our wealth through time and ownership of households, and it's passed down from generation to generation. So that hasn't happened in some of the minority populations, because I mean, in the 60s, I mean, there was redlining and there was all kinds of horrible things that went on, and that they wouldn't loan monies to certain populations in certain neighborhoods. So there's kind of this thing that's gone over since 1960s. 69, I think, is when we passed the Fair Housing Act. So I mean, there's still things that are kind of tailing through, but until that went through, I mean, there was a lot of discrimination going on, and it's still kind of being felt now.
When you're talking about housing, Jeff, there's this restriction that was put on some pieces of property or section tract.
Yeah.
Do we have some of those in Lakewood?
Good question. I don't know.
Well, the answer to that is yes. We have, just over 1,000 parcels that in the plats or in the covenants have restrictions about what race can live there and the other. Now, those are still on the books, but the state passed a law about 15 years ago that said, even if they're on the books, they're not enforceable.
Right.
And that law was particularly directed at realtors and mortgage lenders. But the state couldn't remove them from the documents in the assessor's office. That actually, in order to get it removed, if you have a house that has that on your plat, and it's maybe if it's something that's just specific to your house, you could send a letter to the assessor and he'd take it off of official records. But if you're in a neighborhood of where it was developed as a plat where there's 45 houses that have that same language on there, okay, and it again, it's not operational, but it looks bad. But the assessor can't do anything unless all 45 property owners send him a letter and saying, change the official document. So it's something that's being looked at to do that. And Lakewood is not unique. That basically every community from Lakewood through Everett has those things were done, because it was just sort of standard boilerplate language that was put in a whole lot of things when developers were developing flats back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, to be able to go and do that. And they put them in because they were responding to what the market wanted in terms of the character of neighborhoods at the time.
I have to go to a planning advisory board meeting at 7, so I'm gonna have to jump out of here pretty soon. But- So I mean, that's our annual action plan, kind of in a nutshell. Like I said, some of the interesting things. That was the other thing that just jumped out here real fast. So it kind of goes to the same thing with Black and white ownerships. That again, this was a 2022 study by U.S. Treasury. They found that the Black and white gap in households has remained pretty much unchanged in the last 30 years. Again, we had the National Affordable Housing Act, or National, what did I just lose?
Fair Housing Act.
Fair Housing Act, sorry, Fair Housing Act 1969. So the homeownership gap between white and Black households is almost exactly the same as it is in 2020 as it was in 1970. So almost nothing has changed. It's really sad. The average Black household home has a value 2.5 times that of 2.5 times lower than a white household's. And that's the same thing that it was in 1970. So it's interesting that where Hispanic and minority and Black populations can buy households is typically in lower income, smaller houses, lower home value neighborhoods. And that obviously, it kind of has a ripple effect for the households, the children going to college, being able to pay for different things, because I mean, you use your household equity to pay for everything. So it's kind of interesting that there's still that issue going on. So that kind of leads me down the path, and I think also down the path, affordable housing is still an issue.
But I would look at it, this last sentence, Lakewood passed the threshold of we're no longer more than 50% white.
Yes.
We're now only 48% white, and 52% of our population is, one of the other ethnicities. So and that ratio has changed even more greatly in the school district. Percentage of white students compared to students that are of another demographic is much more extreme than that, and it's particularly more extreme from that when you disregard JBLM. Okay, and so that really has to do with there are a lot of people under 18 who are non-white residents of the city, being able to go through and do that. So, that is one demographic that has been changing while others have stayed the same.
We're kind of the mirror opposite of most cities. Most cities are the exact opposite.
And the school district has said that the percentage of white students who go on to college and of students who are non-white, they go on to college, those percentages have been converging. They're starting to see opportunities open up for that. Now, I don't know that it has to do with the scholarship opportunities, but also the fact that a university isn't really the only real option that here in Washington State, the community college has expanded greatly, plus locally Pacific Lutheran University and the University of Washington Tacoma have been very aggressive at marketing themselves to the entire population, not just to a population that looks like they're an alumni roster.
Well, and the folk tech schools have been really aggressive, because I have a young man that's in my neighborhood, it's a folk tech person, and letting us all know how we're not doing it right, which is great.
Well, and that's true. I mean, the range of opportunities is there. One place that is not progressing as well is in apprenticeship. That there is a real need to try to help, particularly younger folks of color, to get into apprenticeship. For many, many years have been, you could get into the union if you knew someone who was in the union.
I have to sneak out of here.
The original 4-year degree.
Yeah.
You guys don't, there's no action or anything on the annual action plan or anything. I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed kind of where we're at. The next big cycle for y'all in the CSAB is going to be the 5-year planning cycle. And that starts in about 7 months, probably somewhere in that ballpark. So you guys will all get to see that process and get involved from the start all the way to the finish of that 5-year cycle one. So it's coming up quick. If you have any questions, you can ask Martha. I have to go to planning commission because Tiffany's probably going to come strangle me in a minute. Sorry about that.
Well,
Thank you, that was great.
that you probably can physically resist.
I don't know, I.
My mother has taught me better. I will, I will let Tiffany strangle me and complain.
Anything else further for the good of the order? Comments, anything? Welcome to, make sure I get your names right. Denise and Shelby. Oh, my goodness. And if anybody wants this America's flag, please take it. Meeting adjourned.
So nice to see you all.
So was that just a disgruntled person outside of?
Mental health.
What's happening?
Oh, the disturbance before was mental health.
You out?
Mental health issue. The disturbance before
Uh-huh.
was a mental health issue.
Good to meet y'all.
Pleasure meeting you as well.
You're gonna have to take this home.
Yeah.
What kind of flag is it?
It's a Mariners flag.
Mariners flag.
You've been drafted again.
Okay.
Well, last time I was drafted, I was not present at the meeting, so at least this time I had.
You have to show up. Or you
That's
get voted
Seahawks.
in.
Actually, it's a Seahawks flag.
Seahawks
All the
flag.
stuff off. Yeah, I'll lock it up. There was some lady, she's running around without clothes on, so we called. I tried to get Officer Fitzgerald, but she wasn't on duty, so they're sending somebody else.
So they're okay. It's okay to go outside.
Yeah, it was a younger lady. She's probably in her 20s and.
Anyway, this is Seahawks. If you want it, you can have it.
I will find someone who will put it.
Okay, market it for me then.
Yeah, yeah.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Mhm. I'm actually hoping that I stay with this committee and can pass off the public safety committee. To some.
Well, this committee is very interesting, I think, to try to market it because when we meet, it's very intense.
Yeah.
But we don't meet consistently, which I think holds people's interest.
Well, I will say one thing about this committee is you have real work to do with real timelines.
Absolutely. It's a
So,
real structure.
it, while it can be intense, it will also feel meaningful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, we'll turn these lights on. It's still daylight, that's right.
Yeah, daylight saving time is 15.
I mean, we.